Happy 2024, Happy New Year. I hope you had a great holiday season and welcome you back to another video. So every year for the past few years, I've been doing a guide, you can call it, on what Sony camera to get for that current year. So I'll link those past videos in the description below because some of those cameras that I talked about in those videos might be relevant because they're on the used market to be able to get them at a discount. So today I'll go over a list of cameras that you can consider for this year that are under $2,000. I'll go over full frame cameras, APS-C crop sensor cameras, and also the 1-inch type cameras. I'll also be going over what camera you should consider depending on whether you're a filmmaker, a photographer, a vlogger, or a content creator. I'll also mention a few drawbacks on each of these cameras, and there might be a ton of information on specs and features on this video, so I'll be linking all of the cameras that I'll be talking about in this video in the description below, so you can take your time and go in and click on them and check out their full specs list. Alright, so let's get started. So we'll start with the smallest sensor cameras and move our way up. So we'll start with the 1-inch type sensors. The first camera I want to talk about in this category is the Sony CV1 Mark II. This is an update to the CV1, the first version, and it was released in 2023. It currently costs $798 and it has a 20.1 megapixel sensor. It has a fixed lens with a 35mm equivalent of 18mm to 50mm and an aperture from f1.8 to f4. It has a flip out LCD screen, real-time tracking, and eye autofocus. It has also a cinematic vlog setting and some of the AI settings and AI features found in other CV cameras like product showcase and background defocus. It also has a built-in multi-directional mic which orients itself to computer recognized faces when in auto mode. It has a microphone port and is compatible with Sony's multi-interface shoe. Another cool thing it has is that it has a built-in 3-stop ND filter and it also has advanced image stabilization. It shoots raw photos and video in 4K up to 30 frames per second and 120 frames per second in 1080p, but it does not have 4K 60. It also has S-Log 3 and HLG picture profiles for video. In terms of some of the drawbacks is that it does not have 10-bit color, only 8-bit, and there is no headphone jack if you want to monitor your audio. So who is this camera for? I think this camera is for vloggers or content creators who would like to have really good automatic features and not have to worry about a ton of camera settings. And this will also be for people who want to take advantage of some of Sony's new AI features as well. Although this could be used for photography as well, I wouldn't consider this a photographer first camera. The next camera in this category is one that is very capable, but not many people actually talk about. This is the Sony RX100 Mark VII, which is currently the latest version. It was released in 2019 and is currently sitting at about $1,298. Although it looks like a point-and-shoot camera, it has a ton of features that are actually really good. And the entire camera is actually modeled after the A9 series. It has a 20.1 megapixel sensor and a fixed lens with a focal length that goes from 24mm to 200mm, which is a very versatile range for an everyday compact camera. And that range also makes this camera great for travel. You can shoot raw photos with this camera, you get video in 4K 30 frames per second and in 1080p up to 120 frames per second. You also get flat picture profiles like S-Log 3 and also unlimited video recording. There's also a mic port to plug in an external microphone. What's really cool about this camera too is that you get the HFR feature, the high frame rate feature, which allows you to shoot bursts of 960 frames per second slow motion clips. It has a tilt-up screen, but unfortunately not a fully articulating screen. It has face detection autofocus as well as real-time tracking and eye autofocus. In terms of some of the drawbacks is that there is no cold shoe mount and there is no jack for a microphone. So who is this camera for? I think this camera is for those who want almost like a point-and-shoot style sort of camera that is compact, super easy for travel, and that has a great versatile zoom range. Also good for those who don't want a hassle of carrying around different types of lenses, but also have the capability and that zoom range. It has a ton of features that make this camera very capable. The next category of cameras are the crop sensor or the APS-C sensor cameras. These sensors are larger than the 1-inch type sensors, and therefore give you better image quality and better low light performance. The first one is the Sony a6700 that recently came out in mid-2023, and it costs currently $1,398. It has a 26 megapixel sensor and can shoot video in 4K up to 120 frames per second, albeit with a 1.58 crop, but there is no crop in 4K 60. It can also do 240 frames per second in HD, and all of this is done with a full 1:1 pixel readout without binning. It has 422 10-bit color, S-Log 3, S-Zenitone, 14 stops of dynamic range, and a back illuminated sensor that gives this camera its higher resolution. You are also even able to load in your own LUTs into this camera. It has great autofocus, AI framing, 5 axes of in-body stabilization, a mic and a headphone jack, and a flip-out touchscreen. In the photo side of things, it has the HEIF high efficiency image file, which is available in 420 and 422 options. Another pro is that it uses Sony's larger APSC 100 battery as opposed to the tiny smaller ones from before. The a6700 can also be powered via a USB connection to a computer or a mobile battery, and this connection can also be used to charge the battery. In terms of drawbacks, I really couldn't find any. At this price point, I feel that this camera is really great for the money. It has a ton of features, and it's great for photographers and videographers. In my opinion, this is a great hybrid camera for anyone who is trying to get into videography or filmmaking, or people who are serious about shooting both photo and video. If you're already a seasoned videographer or filmmaker, this might be a great B or even a C camera. I don't see any drawbacks with this camera, but if you do notice some, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about what those are. The next camera in this category is the Sony CV-E10, which is currently $698. This is a 24 megapixel camera that came out in 2021. It has great hybrid autofocus with real-time eye autofocus for humans and animals, as well as real-time tracking. On the video side of things, it can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second and 120 frames per second in HD. It also has HLG and S-Log 3 picture profiles. The video is also oversampled from a 6K sensor, giving it an even crispier 4K look. It has a flip-out screen, a front tally lamp, and a headphone and microphone jack. It has a 3-capsule directional mic on top, as well as active steady shot, and features like product showcase, background defocus, and face priority auto exposure. The drawbacks on this camera is that it uses 420 8-bit color and the smaller Sony camera battery, and the smaller Sony battery, which isn't that great. So who is this camera for? In my opinion, this camera falls in a similar category of targeted users like the Sony CV1 Mark II, but with the ability that you now get of swapping out different lenses and a bigger sensor compared to the CV1 Mark II. I think this camera is great for vloggers, content creators who want a really good camera to record great video and don't want to fiddle too much with camera settings. There are a ton of AI features and auto features that content creators can leverage on this camera. If you are primarily a photographer, although this camera might be good for you too because it shoots raw photos, it might not be the first one to go for, especially if you are serious about photography. The next camera in this series is the Sony a6600, released in 2020, and it's currently about $1,198. Because it's been here for a while now, you can usually find this a little cheaper in the used market. This is the previous model of the updated a6700, so here are some features that the a6600 does not have compared to the a6700. It has a 24 megapixel sensor and can only shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second. Although it does have flat picture profiles like S-Log 3 and also HLG, it cannot shoot 10-bit as opposed to the a6700. The a6600 can only do 8-bit color. It also does not have a fully articulating screen, only a tilting screen. It does have great hybrid autofocus though and in-body image stabilization. In terms of some of the drawbacks, it does not have 10-bit color, it only has a tilting screen, and because it is a little older, it does not have some of the newer AI features, like product feature or background defocus, that the Sony a6700 has. So who is this camera for? This camera, I think, is enough to get you started for both filmmaking and photography if you are a hybrid shooter and want to get into both. It has pretty good image quality for photo and video, but you're restricted to only 8-bit color. But if you're looking to step up your video quality, I'll definitely pay a little bit more and go for the A6700. Unless you want to save some money, you can probably get the A6600 on the used market because it's been out a few years already. Like the A6700, this camera has in-body image stabilization, so this is great for handheld photography, wildlife, or sports. The next camera in this list is the Sony FX30, which came out in 2022 and is currently $1,798. It has a 26 megapixel sensor, and although this camera can shoot raw photos, it is primarily a video camera geared towards filmmakers and videographers. This is Sony's entry-level cinema camera in the under $2,000 range. It can shoot 4K video up to 60 frames per second, up to 120 frames per second with a crop, and up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. It shoots 4:2 10-bit color at a really high bit rate and can also shoot 16-bit raw video via an external recorder. It has HLG, S-Log, S-Cinetone, and 14 plus stops of dynamic range. It also has dual base ISO, in-body image stabilization, a fast hybrid autofocus, and professional lock shooting modes such as flexible ISO and Cine EI. These are a little bit more on the video side of things, so if you're not sure what they mean, they're more specifically features for filmmakers. The drawbacks of this camera is that there is no internal ND filter and that there is no viewfinder. In terms of who this is for, this is geared towards videographers and filmmakers. If you're looking at getting started in filmmaking, this will be the camera to go for. If you want to take photos as well and shoot video at the same time, I probably would not recommend this camera. You're probably better suited with a hybrid camera like the ones that I mentioned above, or some of the ones I'll be talking about later on. So before I move on to the next category, there are two honorable mentions of some older cameras that might still be very suitable for your needs because they're a lot cheaper right now. Those cameras are the A6400 and the A6100. They both came out in 2019 and currently they're both under $1,000, and you might probably be able to get them even cheaper because they've been out for a while. If you want to hear more about what those cameras have and some of their main features, you can go to one of the videos in the description below or the one here to get more information on those cameras. So the next category is the full frame camera category. The two cameras that I have in this category are slightly above the $2,000 mark, unfortunately, but they're kind of close, so I've included them in this video. The first one is the brand new Sony a7C Mark II, which came out recently in 2023, and it is currently $2,198. This is a beast of a camera and it have a ton of features, making it a really good entry-level full-frame camera, and it's even $300 cheaper than the Sony a7 IV. It has a bunch of features that the Sony a7 IV doesn't have, but I have done a video where I talked about the Sony a7 IV and why I would still pick that up over the Sony a7C Mark II. So if you're interested in that video, again, I'll be linking that in the description below. So the a7C Mark II has a 33 megapixel sensor and it can do 4K, 30, and up to 60 frames in 4K with a crop. It can also shoot 120 frames per second in HD, and it can do all of this in 10-bit color. It also has flat picture profiles, as well as S-Cinetone, user LUTs, and improved 7 stops of in-body image stabilization, which is pretty crazy, an improved autofocus system, and a fully articulating touchscreen. It can also shoot photos in the HEIF format, and it has a ton of features including auto framing and focus stacking, which previously was only available in some of the more expensive full-frame cameras. In terms of some of the drawbacks, this camera has no joystick, only a single SD card slot compared to other full-frame cameras, and a micro HDMI port as opposed to a full-size HDMI port that is there on the Sony a7 IV and other bigger full-frame cameras. This camera, like the a7 IV, is also prone to rolling shutter, so that's something to keep in mind. So who is this camera for? This is for hybrid shooters, videographers, filmmakers, and photographers who want to step into the full-frame world, especially if you wanted a smaller and a compact sized body in a full-frame camera. If you are a vlogger or a content creator that want a better image quality than that of the other ones mentioned earlier, this might be also the camera to go for. The next camera is the Sony CVE1, which is currently $2,198. This camera also came out in 2023, and it has pretty much the exact same pricing as the Sony a7C Mark II. Unlike the a7C Mark II though, it has a 12 megapixel sensor and can shoot 4K up to 120 frames per second, and it can also do 240 frames per second in HD. It also has in-body image stabilization, 15 plus stops of dynamic range, S-Log 3, a Cinetone, user LUTs, a headphone and a microphone jack, and the AI module that has features like product showcase, multi-face recognition, bokeh switch, and auto framing. In terms of some of the drawbacks, it has the same drawbacks as the Sony a7 II, plus the fact that it's also a smaller megapixel sensor. So if you're serious about photography, then I would definitely go for the a7C Mark II as opposed to this one. So who is this camera for? I think this camera is primarily for content creators and bloggers for its video capabilities. It can do photos, it can shoot photos. Perhaps if you're shooting a thumbnail for YouTube, then it's probably fine. But if you're serious about photography, the 12 megapixels on this camera are quite limiting. I have also two more honorable mentions of two older cameras that are still very, very capable, and you might be able to find them in the used market because they've been out for a while now. So the first one is the Sony a7 III, and the second one is the Sony a7C. Another honorable mention is the Sony a7 IV, although it is not close to $2,000, it's more expensive at $2,500 at the time of the making of this video. It is a very, very solid camera and is currently my main camera for most of the work that I do, whether it be video or photography. I have made some videos talking about the Sony a7 IV, so if you're interested in those, again, links in the description below. So that is it for this video. I hope that you're able to get a better idea of what Sony cameras are out there under the $2,000 mark or slightly above the $2,000 mark, and which camera might be best suited for the things that you do. As usual, let me know in the comments below if there are any questions that you have, and I'll try my best to answer them. And before you leave this video, here are a couple more videos that you might be interested in. So I'll see you there.